The wife checked her husband's phone and found these names. The tender one. The amazing one. Lady of my dreams. She got angry and called the first number to find out that was his mother. Then she called the second number, to which his sister replied. When she dialed the third number, her own phone rang. She cried until her eyes got swollen because she had doubted her innocent husband. So she gave him her whole month's salary to make up for it. Husband took the money and bought a gift for his girlfriend, whose name was saved as Uncle Mike, the mechanic. One hot day, we found an old, straggly cat at our door. She was a sorry sight. Starving, dirty, smelled terrible, skinny, and hair all matted down. We felt sorry for her and put her in a carrier and took her to the vet. She had no name, so we named her The vet decided to keep her for a day or so and said he would let us know when we could come and get her. My husband, the complainer, said, "Okay, but don't forget to wash her. She stinks." My husband and my vet don't like each other. He calls my husband El Cheap O. My husband calls him El Take Zero. They love to hate each other. Next day, my husband had an appointment with his doctor, which was located next door to the vet. The doctor's office was full of people waiting to see the doctor. A side door opened, and in leaned the vet. He had obviously seen my husband arrive. He looked straight at my husband. "Your wife's finally clean. She now smells like a rose. And by the way, I think she's pregnant. God knows who the father is." And he closed the door. A blind man had trouble finding love because of his disability. However, he did have one thing going for him, an impressively large ahem asset. Since relationships weren't working out, he asked his best friend to take him to a well-known local establishment, Pleasure Palace. At the front desk, his friend quietly told the hostess, "My buddy here is blind, but I promise you won't be disappointed." Curious, the woman agreed and led him to a private room. But when she saw what he was working with, she knew she couldn't handle it alone. She called in another woman, then another. Finally, the manager had to step in. After assessing the situation, the manager shook his head and said, "I'm sorry, but you'll have to take him somewhere else." His friend thought for a moment, and then took him straight to your mom's house. A few minutes after she was hired, the boss and the secretary got up from the couch in the office and started dressing. "I want to confess," the secretary says as she lifts her pants. "I hope it does not mess up our relationship after what has just happened on the couch. But I don't really type as fast as I said in the interview." "It's okay," the new boss replies. "I want to confess too, and I hope it doesn't mess up our relationship. I'm not the boss here at all. I'm the cleaner." A man answers the phone and has the following conversation. "Yes, mother, I've had a hard day. Gladys has been most difficult. I know I ought to be more firm, but it is hard. Well, you know how she is. Yes, I remember you warned me. I remember you telling me that she was a vile creature who would make my life miserable, and you begged me not to marry her. You were perfectly right. You want to speak with her? All right." He looks up from the telephone and calls to his wife in the next room. "Gladys, your mother wants to talk to you." After a church service on Sunday morning, a young boy suddenly announced to his mother, "Mom, I've decided to become a priest when I grow up." "That's okay with us," she said, "but what made you decide that?" "Well," said the little boy, "I have to go to church on Sunday anyway, and I figure it will be more fun to stand up and yell than to sit down and listen." A man noted for his tact was awakened one morning at 4 o'clock by his ringing telephone. "Your dog's barking, and it's keeping me awake," said an irate voice. The man thanked his caller and politely asked his name before hanging up. The next morning, at 4 o'clock, he called his neighbor back. "Sir," he said, "I don't have a dog." A super hot woman arrived at a party. While scanning the guests, she spotted an attractive man standing alone. She approached him, smiled, and said, "Hello, my name is Carmen." "That's a beautiful name," he replied. "Is it a family name?" "No," she replied. "As a matter of fact, I gave it to myself. It represents the things that I enjoy the most, cars and men. Therefore, I chose Carmen." "What's your name?" she asked. He answered, "BJ Titzengolf." A piano player is playing at a bar when a well-dressed gentleman approaches him and says, "The boss wants you to play Strangers in the Night." The piano player looks at him and says, "Not a problem." And he begins to play the tune. The gentleman doesn't leave. He tells the piano player, and he wants it in A-flat minor. The piano player stops briefly, smiles, and changes the key without missing a beat. The gentleman looks down once more and says, "And he wants in 5/4 time." The piano player stops playing for a moment and thinks. Then he smiles and begins again. "Strangers in the friggin' night. Exchanging glances. Strangers in the friggin' night." A company was looking to hire for a crucial role, and after an extensive interview process, narrowed their candidates down to 3. To determine who would be the best fit, they decided to ask each finalist the same question. The catch? They had only 24 hours to provide their answer, and whoever gave the most insightful response would land the job. The question was this: a man and a woman are lying in bed. The woman is on her side with her back to the man, while the man faces her back. What is the man's name? The following day, the 3 candidates returned with their answers. The first candidate, a young man, said, "My answer is that there is no answer." The second, more analytical, said, "Given the details, it's impossible to figure out the man's name." The third candidate, an older gentleman with a twinkle in his eye, chuckled and said, "Well, I'm not entirely sure, but I've narrowed it down to 2 possibilities, Willie Turner or Willie Naylor." The room erupted in laughter, and the job was his. James gets a job at an Italian restaurant. He finds his boss to be extremely unsettling. He is old, very stern, and demanding. He takes the job anyway because he's desperate to make money. One day, strange men in suits walk in 5 minutes before closing time. Unlike anyone he's ever seen in the area. He goes to the back and tells his boss that he has some strange visitors. The boss gets up and goes to greet them. He comes back 5 minutes later, and James asks who they are. "Inspectors, they have to be. Quick! I want you to call Mr. and Mrs. Fisher, how do you say, the cleaners?" "Yes." So James called them, and they arrived in no time. They frantically start cleaning the kitchen in secrecy while the suited men order their meal. The boss suddenly calls James over and says, "They have ordered the number 22. We are understaffed. Go to the kitchen and help. I want them to see quick service." "Me? I'm not a cook," says James. "You are now," says the boss. He leans in toward James with a stone-cold stare, and under his breath he mutters, "If you don't cook, you will be sweeping with the Fishers."